Hey everyone, Duke here, and with a lot of interest in armor builds and some of the triple hundred builds and things like that that I've gotten and received lately, I figured it would be a good time to actually go into D2 Armor Picker. This is a website that basically allows you to use all of the armor that you have and really easily get these stat distributions that you can potentially get from that armor. Otherwise, you have to do it yourself. I'm sure some people maybe can take care of that and do that, but this is going to be a lot easier and a lot faster of a way to take the armor you farmed and then be able to actually use it with the armor stats that you want to achieve. So you're going to be able to see what stats you want to achieve kind of on this first section, but what I'd recommend doing first is picking the exotic for the build that you're trying to make. This is going to make it a lot easier and be able to kind of actually see what stats you are able to achieve. So we're going to start off with Fallen Sunstar. I've been using this build quite a bit this season, and we're really liking Arc just in general with the different artifact mods and stuff like that. But again, you can pick any exotic of your choice, whatever build you're trying to make, but we're going to specifically choose Fallen Sunstar first. And so then you can go back up to the stats and start messing around. So for PvE, I like to start with 100 Resilience. That's just pretty much every single build I ever do. I want to have 100 Resilience there. Then 100 Discipline is going to be really, really useful for what I want to do. And if I want to go for the triple hundreds, we'll go for 100 Recovery as well. You also notice, like, as we do different things, that like possible stat distributions will no longer be possible, right? So as we have 100 Resilience and 100 Discipline, we can still get 100 recovery, but we can only get certain amounts of mobility, certain amount of intellect, certain amount of strength. We can no longer get the 90 or 100 on intellect here. It starts to gray out. So if you really wanted, let's say, like at least 50 intellect, you could pick that first, and then then you could pick recovery. You can kind of go with the stats that are most important to you, and I would do those in order so that you can see what is possible as you're going through, right? So for me, if I just want the triple hundreds, I can just pick all the 100 builds, and we're good to go. And then we can start seeing the different types of builds that we can use with our current exotic and our current triple hundred build. Also scrolling down a bit, this is also very important that I didn't mention first, but I did have them activated. You're going to want to make sure to have these stat boost selections for whatever class you're using, because a lot of different builds, or Arc Solar, Void Stasis, Strength, they have different either plus 10 or minus 20 in some case modifiers to your stats that are going to affect your total stats. So make sure that any stat modifying fragments that you're using on your build, you activate and you check mark these here for whichever ones you're using. If you happen to not be using any ones that actually change your stats, that's fine. This only shows the ones that actually change your stats, because if they don't change your stats, it's not going to affect your armor builds at all. But make sure you check any of the ones that you're using for your specific build. And if you're making multiple builds, which I've ran into this issue a few times before while using this because I just forget, but if you're going to do like a void build next with a different void exotic, make sure you change this. Otherwise that can potentially mess you up with making the next build, because you're probably going to have a different distribution of plus 10 or minus 10 or minus 20 stats that you're going to have for a different subclass. So really make sure you check this probably first, or at least early, like right with the exotic, so that you can make sure that you have the right distribution and the right stats that are actually going to appear when you're using these armor builds. So once you have the stats that you want, again, you can get even a little bit more specific. Like let's say we for sure want the 30 intellect, which is the maximum that we can get. Now we're going to see what possible builds we have, which we actually only have one build exactly with the triple hundreds and 30 intellect. So this would make it pretty simple. But let's just say, we went back here and you just wanted to like get the max amount of total stats possible. You can click the max tiers here to sort by the max tiers, which actually we have exactly one build that allows us to get 38 total tiers, which again is the 30 basically from the 10 to 10 to 10, and then you have 2 tiers of mobility, 2 tiers of intellect, 4 tiers of strength. So you get an extra tier basically of the mobility compared to the 37 here, or you get an extra tier of the intellect compared to this one that has 37. But again, I'd rather have the tier 3 intellect build here, and then again, this is still a 38 tier build, and we can see what we have. And if you hit this little drop arrow down on the right side, you're going to see exactly the pieces that you need in order to create this build. Now, one other tip, going down to the advanced settings, if you are someone that doesn't have a lot of masterworked armor, I would highly recommend assuming that your stuff is masterwork, because at some point, if you're trying to make and max out your builds, you're going to masterwork your armor. Definitely want to masterwork your armor. So clicking the assume all legendary items are masterworked, assume all exotic items are masterworked, and assume that class items are masterworked is going to allow you to see like your maximum total build, even if it's not there yet, or especially even if you already have like the materials that you need to masterwork things, but you have a lot of armor in your vault that isn't masterworked. I mean, most people probably don't masterwork every last thing that they get, right? So you're going to want to have these all checked so that when it's doing the calculations, it will automatically quote unquote assume that it's masterwork, so it'll give you those extra stats and give you those best possible builds that you can get. So again, going back in here, you can see the different pieces that we have. You can see the like total stats that are going to be on each individual piece. You can see the total armor distribution that we get from the different, the actual armor itself, and then you can see what the configuration that we have, the plus 10 and minus 10 stats on our specific arc fragments. You can see if we're using any minor mods, the major mods that we're going to need to put this in, and the artifice pieces that are giving the plus 3s on each stat, so that'll allow you to kind of see what you need for each of those. Now, what we can do to make this even easier, though, is we can actually open this loadout in dim. If we're going to use kind of a second website as well here with Destiny Item Manager. I'm sure a lot of people use that as well. But if you don't, again, open a loadout in dim. That'll automatically open dim. Or if you don't already have dim, I'm sure it'll prompt you to download it or something like that. But that'll immediately open it up down here as a D2 armor picker loadout. And will show you the armor in your build. It even shows like the subclass stuff that is in your build as well. And from there, we're just going to change the name just because we already have one that has that same name, I believe, just from other builds that I've done and testing that I've done. But change the name for whatever you want to make it. If you want to name it probably something specific so that you remember what it is. This will also be useful because these loadouts can be extra on top of the loadouts in-game. So if you ever like change the loadout in-game and like override it on accident or whatever, you can come back here and have this same loadout saved. But on the bottom, you're going to hit save, and then here you'll have it, see, you can see the test right here, and then if you hit apply right here, that's going to automatically put all this armor on for you in game. So you don't have to find it, you don't have to do anything like that. You just literally hit apply, that'll put all the armor on for you. You'll notice that the class item's not here. That's because it's just any class item is going to be the same. Technically, for this build, I think it's specifically an artifice class item, but class items don't have stats, so any class item technically can work. But if you hit apply, it'll just move all this to your character. Even if it's not on your character, it'll put it on for you as well. And then again, if it's not already masterworked, like this build already has all the items masterworked on it. But if it's not masterworked, you'll notice that the stats are going to be a little bit off. You'll need to actually masterwork it because again, we have that check-marked box of assume everything is masterworked. If for some reason you don't want to do that, or you just aren't going to ever masterwork your armor for some reason, again, obviously you wouldn't want to check these because that will give you stats that you don't actually have. But again, I would assume when you're trying to min-max your builds using a website like this and trying to get those 100 builds, that you're going to masterwork your armor. So just keep that in mind as well. Do note also that hitting apply should also put all the mods that you need in terms of the resilience recovery mods here as well. That when you hit apply, that should throw them all into your build as well. If it doesn't, again, you might need to look into that a little bit. And again, you can go back here to see the exact amounts of each mod that you need. So again, we need 4 major resilience mods and 1 recovery mod. Again, you can put those kind of anywhere. And you can also maneuver those around. Like if you, in this case, they both cost 4, but if you, let's say, needed like a discipline mod to get to 100, that would only cost 3, so you can maneuver them into different places depending on what other mods you actually want to use in your build. Like, let's say your helmet, you have like more expensive mods, so you'd put the discipline mod there that only costs 3 and allow you to have 7 extra energy to use other mods. So just keep that in mind as well. Very, very useful tip that you can use to kind of min-max everything, not just your stats, but also the amount of mods you can put in your gear. Also, one last final useful tip, let's just say you were making builds and you had multiple options, you weren't sure which one you wanted to do out of all the potential options that were on your screen, right? You can go down to the bottom here, and if you go to configuration management and you just name it something, we already have one test, so we'll do test 2, name it and save it. This is going to allow you to basically open this configuration again at a later date. So like if you're, let's say, I don't know, you're switching stuff up, you're doing like a new build, now you're doing Skull of Dire Ahamkara build, and you're doing all sorts of craziness, and you change this, and you change that, and you did this, and you put that over there. Like just, you're messing around and you're doing all sorts of different things. If you then come back and go to test 2 and load this configuration right here, that's going to, you'll definitely want to hit OK, and it'll update everything. You come back up, and you'll be back to where you started. You're back on the Fallen Sunstar, you're back on the 100 builds, and you can see, again, everything that you were at before you change things. So it's very, very useful if you're not like 100% guaranteed, like, oh, this is 100% the build I want to use. There's some different options. You can use this configuration management, save it, and kind of come back to it at a later date. But yeah, I hope this guide to the D2 armor picker and a little bit of dim as well was helpful. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.